Hello, welcome to another episode of Beside Ourselves. It's a podcast on business AI adoption. We are Beside Partners, a partnership of consultants and CIOs helping companies with their AI adoption. My name is Theo. I'm based in Cologne in Germany, and with me today, as always, is Giles from Cambridge. Hey, Giles, how are things?
I'm not too bad. How are you, Theo?
I'm well. Particularly enjoyed our last episode, for which we got good feedback. It was great, and please do keep it coming. In our last episode, we talked about AI and user experience. It was clearly a subject that was close to our hearts. And one of the things that came out was that AI is everywhere and how this is causing concerns and headaches for users. It raises some privacy and safety concerns, all these things. And it's not just for users that is where the problems lie. It is also for employers. And they've got a duty of care for their team members, but also the bare responsibility if things go wrong, if there are data leaks or privacy breaches, all these things. And what was great about that was that we got a question on LinkedIn from Dawn about that, and we thought we would use that as a topic for this week's episode. The question is, where would you target regulation, having built tech offerings in highly regulated spaces like healthcare, like finance? What is the role of regulation in helping us balance between user safety and innovation? It's a really good question, isn't it, Giles? It's really something that we both feel strongly about.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's something that's not talked about enough. And I've been on a few panels over the years that focused around AI. And I know there are some people out there that's really, it's really, really passionate about this, and there's, whole ethics and that kind of stuff. There's a whole, not subculture, but it's a topic in its own right and stuff like that as well. I think we've seen some. I guess if we try, and I think we discussed this sort of before we recorded. I think a lot of this could be opinion led. Going back, I think it was the very first podcast we did where I was going, I'm not a finance person. I think we should say neither of us are lawyers. Neither of us are lawyers. So a lot of this is going to be based upon our personal opinion. But I think the one thing I can point to is the kind of whole data privacy side of stuff. So that's largely here in Europe anyway, is underpinned by the GDPR regulations that exist. Obviously, since Brexit and UK moving away, but we've basically got UK GDPR.
There's an equivalent, though, right? Yeah,
exactly. We just mirror what's there. That's seen as, globally as being the gold standard. So a lot of countries, particularly, in my experience, and I guess our experience of working with web-based technologies where data privacy, data capture is quite important. If you said you adhere to GDPR, that seemed to be the kind of rubber stamp, regardless of whether the territory you're in actually adheres to that. And we know that the EU are already looking at, legislation and guidance around that. I think around AI specifically, I think if we look, I think there's general consensus there needs to be some sort of regulation that complete free reign, that there are risks associated with it, and you can step aside what we're doing. There's obviously the whole conversations around AI used in terms of conflicts and warfare and all that kind of stuff. There's the, ultimately then going down the line of, the Terminator 2, type model, the Matrix model. But kind of joking aside, there's obviously really kind of key, topics there around, from an ethical perspective, what's right and wrong. But of course, you've got the big providers, like, OpenAIs and stuff like that. No, it's fine. We can regulate ourselves and we'll crack on.
It's always fine. Yeah.
Yeah, they're always fine. But my experience, I don't know about yours, is that every industry will say that. The reality is, when the rubber hits the road, does that actually happen? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Personally, I just think, it's not my usual stance. I'm in favor of light regulation.
Yeah.
with a big exception on interoperability. So I think that there is a part of regulation that is about creating open standards, open architecture, so that systems can cooperate. And I think that there is, big positives come from there. I mean, imagine talking about the UK and the rest of Europe, if every European country had its own plug standard, it would be impossible to travel. Now, as it is, and you kindly lent me a UK plug adapter when I was there, right? Now, at least I only have to worry about the one plug not working. But anyway, interoperability aside, with AI, I'm a bit bullish on regulation. And I see that in many ways as an example of we should not let AI follow the path that social media did. So at the moment, there is a lot of conversation about prohibition for 16-year-olds and under. It started in Australia. There's conversation in other countries for social media. And in my mind, prohibition is a failure of regulation. In my mind, you only prohibit stuff if you had failed to put adequate regulation there in the first place. That is to say, we did not regulate social media properly when it was picking up, and now we have got almost no choice because we cannot fix social media and its negative effects, especially on young people, and therefore we fall back on prohibition, or targeted prohibition by age group in this case. And I would not want this to happen to AI, especially as we talk about AI adoption. I'd rather if we went heavy on regulation now, and then be able to kind of like say, okay, this is a framework into which we will operate, and now we can kind of go ahead with further innovation and further adoption. Of course, this is mostly a question of balancing safety and velocity. So on one hand, you have got users and companies that say, like, one solution needs to be robust, needs to be safe, needs to, privacy, data, ownership must be persevered, but at the same time, it cannot be so restrictive that is going to slow me right down, right? That is going to become an obstacle to innovation and adoption. Finding that balance is important on this one. Then there is, there's a lot of questions around it, but that balance is the most important.
Yeah.
What do you think? Are we hitting that balance?
Yeah. Well,
where about are we there?
No, I think you've summed it up perfectly, because you've obviously got the providers don't want any regulation, so they can just obviously just plow ahead, innovate to the max, which is and there's a lot to be said for that, because that's how we've got to where we are today in terms of the technology. But obviously, then there's the users, of which we're all users, that kind of fear of, well, actually, if it's left uncontrolled, where's it going to go? So as you say, it's that balancing act, and then we've got to find that sweet spot. And I'm exactly like you. I don't want, if you over-regulate. But again, if we come back to our background, engineering, if you can, the more you know at the outset, because ultimately a lot of this will come down to engineering changes and stuff like that. Like with regulation around social media, as you mentioned, a lot of that's around age verification. I mean, sticking up a box that says, "Are you over 14?" Yes, that's obviously not going to cut the mustard.
That'll work.
Yeah, that'll work. But if you can put these things in early on, then at least you can engineer these things into the solutions, and it's far easier to then, as you say, take your foot off the gas, or take your foot off the brakes, probably a better analogy rather than gas, than it is to actually then put it on once you've got that momentum.
That's right,
yeah. I think, have we got the balance right? I don't think we've got a balance at all at the moment. I think that's the big problem. I think everybody's just running around going, hang on. I think the innovation is just ploughing ahead, and everybody else is like running along behind going, what does this mean? You've got the politicians on one hand going there. I mean, that's the other thing with the political aspects of this as well, because again, you can see, again, without getting into geopolitics, but you can see each country's trying to position itself, the US wants to be the leader of AI. They see, China and places as a threat. I know the UK's been trying to present itself as an innovation hub where these sort of technology, so everybody can see that. So the governments, so then they've got this quandary, which again probably comes back to, again, it's for them, it's a financial thing, isn't it? Because they're like, well, if we can encourage these things to be developed in our country, then there's probably a taxation upside, and then blah, blah, blah. And if we put too much regulation in, people will go elsewhere. So everybody is, and at the moment, we've got something where people just are almost afraid to make a decision. Therefore, back to your point, have we got it right now? I don't think we have, because we've got nothing there. We're just ploughing on.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Very fragmented, right? Yeah.
Which is
very
why
fragmented.
Yeah, which is why the stuff the EU are doing, I think, is positive, because at least they're chucking something into the ring to say, well, how about this? And I know they're
Mm,
taking their foot off the
a
accelerator
little
in
bit,
that
yeah,
analogy. So they're slowing
yeah.
up, but at least they're trying to put stuff out for discussion. So you've got something to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to me that at the moment with all these blocks, because it's even bigger than countries, right? So it's kind of like at the geopolitical level, is with big states and bigger economic blocks,
Mm.
is that AI is seen as being the realm of the national interest, which trumps personal interest, right? Which goes beyond protecting civilians because there is a national interest. So it's beyond economics. It's AI driven warfare. It's about the economy. It's about creating jobs. It's about being a rule setter, not a rule taker. It's about all these things, and it does create this very fragmented and confusing background. And I do agree with you on this one that we do need to put a framework in place now. Unlike GDPR, which I think that at least in its principle it made a lot more sense, although it was a pain in the neck to implement. Um, my take on the EU AI Act is a little bit. I don't think they quite got it right, and it's one of the reasons why they're pulling back a little bit. It's getting a little bit defunct. It's getting a little bit delayed. It's in conflict with the Draghi report, which came out also last year, which calls for more open borders, for more cooperation between countries, and open technologies and exploitation of technologies, and all these things. And it feels like somebody made the decision, or we collectively made the decision, that it is not time to protect individuals. It is time to kind of protect common interests, right?
Yes.
Which kind of, to me, and especially going into the world of SMEs a little bit, means that, well, if regulation is going to be, for a period of time, is going to continue being light, then it should be down to us as engineers, but also our clients as companies that deploy AI, to do so in a responsible way. I don't want to necessarily say self-regulate, but it is the word that we had. So maybe we can help them. Yeah,
Mm.
maybe we can help them. And the original question on LinkedIn was, where would you target the regulations? And you had a few points over there of where you would put those targets. What should people be thinking about?
Yeah. I mean, the first place I think we should look at is data and consent. And I think actually
For sure.
the GDPR framework almost could be a good launching point, because I think that's one of the challenges we've got at the moment is what data's been captured about me and where is it going and where is it residing? And that is completely unknown. So with GDPR, there was a lot of work around, obviously, informed consent and all that kind of stuff. And we're kind of almost losing that as we go into the AI sense. So the classic example, we had it last week that you and I were doing some workshops with a client, and we were using AI to transcribe those workshops so that we could be fully engaged. So everybody comes into the room, but we inform them at the start of the meeting, that's what we're doing. Is everybody comfortable that, yes, fine. And we know that's what we're supposed to do, but it doesn't always happen. I mean, I can talk to a personal case for myself recently where I was in a meeting that was ultimately transcribed, and even though actually, as it turned out, it was my Microsoft license that was doing it, I wasn't aware it was transcribing it, and then that transcription was later on, used in a kind of legal argument to say, well, you transcribed it and you said this, and it's like, well, hang on. I didn't turn on the transcription. The system did it. And even though I'm a technologist, I wasn't aware it was doing it. But, so you can see where you've got those challenges there where there's no, so you could, to me, it's like if you look at the following the data is a good way to start it, because at that point, you're then having to be transparent about actually what you're doing. So, and actually it's also a lot of these systems as well. A lot of systems act as gatekeepers. So it's like, but where does the
That's
data go
right. Yeah.
once it's in you? Which cloud's it going to? Where does it residing? Where's it going? So I think, that to me is a kind of good place to start is, transparency at the point of capture, or improved transparency at the point of capture for these AI tools, and obviously focusing on the sovereignty of that data and where it resides. Yeah, they were the first kind of place to start. I don't know what
Yeah.
you would think.
Oh, it sounds like the general good practice. I mean, we
Mm.
used to call it kind of safety or security by design and all these things, and it is the same practices. It's at the point of creation, transparent on that, at the point of transmission, at the point of residency, all these things, just good security practices. And in many ways, um, AI self-regulation in that way, it is a matter of following good security practices, whilst at the same time, of course, acknowledging that this is a different technology. Once the
Yes.
data is created, it can be not just manipulated, but it can be used to train an AI, so it can leak in that way, but also it can be used to generate content, um, all the way to not just content, but to kind of like to simulate the content. So our voices, as are being recorded right now, at some point they could be used to, for example, to train an AI that speaks like we do.
Yeah.
Right.
Digital
So
twin.
it's
Yeah.
kind of like exactly. So then the
Yeah.
digital twins, you have got a lot of these implications about um, is it actually reliably authentic content what is being created. For those listening today, we are real people. We're actually talking, and you can tell
Yes.
by all the ums and ahs and everything that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
that stumble into the conversation. Um, beyond that, I also see it as being a brand asset for many SMEs. I see it as being a positional statement that SMEs will basically will say we go above and beyond with our AI transparency to make sure that everything, all the rules are followed. We are more transparent than big tech, and
Mm.
maybe that is something that a lot of companies can choose to do. I mean, we also know a lot of companies that they choose to become, for example, B corporations, right?
Yes. Yes.
Maybe you're not forced by your industry or not by any regulator, but you choose to wear that badge. And maybe just maybe, just thinking out loud over here, maybe there would be an equivalent of a B Corp for AI. Maybe it would be part of it, something like that. Maybe, and you heard that here today for the first time, folks. Maybe that's the beginning of one of them happening. I don't know, some kind of like self regulation like that.
Yes.
Have you
Yeah.
seen people? You think that there would be appetite for this kind of thing?
I think. Yeah. I think I guess the challenge is that most I can't from what we're seeing. You again. I don't want to keep picking on OpenAI, but those sort of players.
Go on
There's
then.
no appetite there. There's no appetite there, and the problem you have is that so many. Um, AI technologies and platforms and vendors that are actually built over the top of that technology. So that's the real challenge. Is you could end up in a situation, and again, this is where I come back to that transparency argument. Is you're engaging with platform X, whatever it is, and you can your contract is with them, and they can say all the best things in the world, but if their data is then sitting on top of other models, and in many instances they're using multiples of them, as they move forward, they're starting to the more agentic stuff's going, well, we'll send that over here to Claude, we'll send that to OpenAI, we'll send that here. They're moving data around. How is that transparent? Because you don't get that when you're engaging with it. You're typing things in, you're speaking to it and stuff like that. It doesn't come back. I mean, the only one that I've seen that does it is Apple. And again, it's a bad example because it's not the best implementation. But if you talk to your Apple device and you've hooked in ChatGPT, it will say to you, I can't answer that. I'm going to send it to ChatGPT, and you have the option to then say, actually, I don't want you to do that. So that's an example there where their system is being transparent about where the data is going and the fact that they're then moving from one system to the other. And I've kind of got off on a real random now, lost my train of thought. But I think that's the big issue is the fact that there are so many layers to these systems.
That's it, yeah.
It's not, you're not invariably talking to one, you're talking to multiple. And if
Mm.
it's not apparent to the user when you're moving from one to the other and actually where the data is going, as you said, it could be used for anything,
It's tricky.
and that sort of stuff. So,
It's tricky to kind of be transparent, even if you want to, I suppose, linking it back to the, B Corp for AI. So even if
yes.
you wanted to, it's technically difficult to do so, which does kind of bring us a very interesting question about, where is the liability? Who is at fault where things go wrong? Now, if you are a company, let's say you're a British SME and you have deployed an app that is, or an AI powered solution that is tailored to your industry or to your company, and it relies on multiple LLMs
Yes.
because model routing is a best practicing, and something goes wrong. There is a terrible hallucination, like in the example, I think it was Cursor or something like that, where the LLM made up some pricing policy that caused hundreds of people to cancel their subscription. So there was actual economic impact or revenue impact to that hallucination. Who is to blame, and how do we track these things? There must be both technical and kind of legal safeguards, I suppose, that you will need to put in there. But that kind of like line of liability becomes fuzzier and fuzzier.
Yeah, and also, how do you actually, again, not wanting to keep cycling back to GDPR, but obviously the ability to withdraw. You can ask, say, I know I want my data back. You can't do that with AI, because once it disappears into the models, what is my data? As you say, we're talking here, and obviously, we're not, but you could say, well, actually, probably, we use Riverside as a platform to record these podcasts. It will transcribe what we're saying. A lot of the stuff that we use, the technologies
Which I
we
should have
use.
said in the beginning, of course, we are being transcribed.
Yeah, we are being transcribed. That's it. Yeah, we are real humans, but we are using a technology that has AI elements built into it to make the production of this easier for us. So when you see, any of the promotional stuff we put on LinkedIn, that's where it's pulled out clips for us. And, anyway, all that's there. But obviously, as I'm standing here talking to you now, is that data being used to improve their transcription model? They're probably using a Gemini, ChatGPT. I'll be honest, I don't actually know off the top of my head. But also, is that piece of knowledge and understanding about the way I speak and the fact I use too many that's gone in. But actually, how can you, if I wanted that back, how can I get it back? Do we need to start looking at, I know, things like blockchain technology, where actually the data is registered on a ledger, so that if at some point you want it back, you can say, well, actually, I want to remove that. And actually, there's some, I know, okay, we're blending technologies now, but do we need to have some of that so the providers can authenticate, well, actually, all these little bits of knowledge have all come from these particular areas? Because that's the thing, there's no traceability, there's no transparency in these models.
Yeah. And there is, of course, with the comparison of GDPR, a key element of GDPR was the right to be forgotten.
Yes.
And as you said, it is now incredibly difficult to exercise that right when you are transcribed, right? Because at some point it's not directly the input. Even if you could delete the input, a model that is trained on that input is not easy to kind of like pick what is yours and to kind of like have that right to be forgotten. And everything, and I think there's one of these technical complexities, and again going back to that balance between safety and velocity or innovation, that is stopping a lot of this regulation from happening. There is so much more we can pick on this one, and literally, although my ringer is not as loud as yours, we just reached the 20-minute mark over here, so I think it's time to start wrapping things up. As usual, though, we both get a chance to kind of weigh in with our closing thoughts or perhaps predictions about where regulations will be. You go first.
I'll go first. Okay, so I think, well, the closing thought, I guess, is just circling back to where we began. I think, personally, well, it sounds like we're in agreement that there needs to be some element of a regulation in here, if for no other reason to improve transparency and accountability. Do we have it at the moment? No. Do we need it? Yes. How are we going to get there? I don't know. I think it's going to be, we've got to find a happy middle ground. It can't be led by the politicians alone. That's no disrespect to them, but it does need technical input. The big vendors are kind of not really wanting to engage, and we've talked about the reason for that. So I think there is an onus on people like us, SMEs, those end users, to have more of a voice in that process. Because I think, and that's where I think, together with governments and geopolitical bodies and stuff, because I think it's going to have to be led by them. I think that's where it comes from. So yes, will it exist? I think it will. How quickly? I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't have anything to the end of the decade. But
Well, that's a sobering thought. I'll be a little bit more bullish, as I said,
Go on
about
then.
it. I think that the EU AI Act and the relating acts that are coming up will, on other geopolitical bodies, will catch on eventually. I think they will start um, lighter and grow in force as time goes by. I do wish that there is enough of a safety created by regulation and self-regulation, whether it is best practice, any of these things, before something really bad happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Remember, regulation is there for a reason. Probably the most visible part of regulation we can think of is seat belts in cars, right? It used to be not mandatory, and when it did become mandatory, lives were saved. Probably hundreds of thousands of lives in the course of decades, and it will be something similar. I mean, I'm not saying that we are going to have things are going to go that badly, but at some point there is going to be something bad that could happen without regulation. So I do hope that we'll catch it first, rather than, to go back to the car analogy, rather than putting the stop sign after an accident has happened. Put the stop
Yeah.
sign before it happens is what
Yeah.
we all hope for. So yeah, I do hope for some velocity over here. I do hope for people to be very careful about this technology, if anything, for innovation's sake. As I said, it's we do not want to be at the point where there's going to be a massive backlash or a prohibition or some kind of, AI winter that is triggered by that. Not when we can just press the pause button, and actually do things a little bit more with a bit more consideration, right?
Yeah. No.
Good.
Yeah. Great points. Yeah.
So that's it for today. Many thanks, Giles, for joining me. It was an
Always a
absolutely
pleasure.
riveting conversation. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for listening today. We will be back with another episode very soon. In the meantime, as always, we'd like to hear from you. Many thanks to Dawn for submitting the question
thanks,
on
Dawn.
LinkedIn. Please send us more questions, more feedback by any of the channels, by the comment section on the podcast. As always, we were beside ourselves to have you with us. Many thanks for listening.
Thanks, everybody.